Good evening, everyone. Sorry we're a couple minutes late. Anyone who may have connected, but we're on now. We had a little technical difficulty there. For some reason, my guest was showing he was backstage, but he wasn't showing up on mine, so I had to log out and back in. Didn't have to do the old reboot thing. Computer world, we know how computers can be and all. But I'll introduce him in a second. But I wanted to say hi to everyone. I've got my new book. I've finally set a release date for my new book, March 3rd, in my new series. I'll share the cover next week because it's going to go out in my newsletter on Monday. But I do have the final logo for that, which is kind of give you an idea where the new series is going to go. But that's going to be what the logo. And I will probably get that as a tattoo, as I did for my Divine Devil series on my arm as well. So we'll eventually get that done here beforehand and all that. So, but my guest tonight is a lawyer and a hopefully soon published author. He's been trying to get published, and he'll be the second lawyer I've had on, so it'll be fun talking about. But I'm going to bring him up now, and it's going to be Phil Kushner, right? How do we pronounce the last name, Phil?
That's right, Randy.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having you on here. We had a little challenge there with technical stuff, but we finally figured it out. Every now and then we've had a little issue here and there. My guests next week, and I'll be talking about that when we're done later, but are going to both be overseas, so that one will be a real challenge. So and all that. But how's it going out Ohio? Right, somewhere in Ohio.
Well, actually, right now I'm in Southwest Florida, where the weather is a whole lot better than it is in Ohio.
I would imagine you're probably getting some of that horrible cold weather that we had gone through for the last week or two in Ohio, I'm sure.
Last week was pretty cold.
Yeah.
Negative temperatures.
Yeah, good old January weather. We had some snow too, and I know a lot of the football games, it looked like it was cold. Football weather, but yeah, it was all good. So, but thanks. And you're in Florida, so I guess you're probably working.
Well, yeah, but working in a better climate.
Well, that's good. So, tell us a little about yourself. What you do. You can tell us what you do, about your family, whatever you want to talk about to get us going here.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in northern Ohio, and only recently have started escaping to Florida in the wintertime, which if you live on the Great Lakes, you'll understand.
Yeah.
And so most of my life lived on Lake Erie. Went away for a while, and I'll talk about that a little more later maybe, but I'm a lawyer. And have a law firm in Cleveland, Ohio. But before that, I was a federal prosecutor. So unlike some lawyers, I've been on both sides of the world, the legal world, both prosecuting and defending in criminal cases, and then also getting involved in a lot of civil cases where could be representing the plaintiff, could be representing the defendant, and have been doing that, lawyering for almost 40 years now.
Oh, you're not that old. Would you start when you were 10?
Yeah, that's what I'll let you believe.
Well, that's a long time. Obviously, successful career. Going back in. So how has the law changed in all that time? I mean, that's one of those where you're constantly having to keep up with all the new codes and laws and everything else. I'm sure it's a constant thing.
Well, the biggest changes in the practice of law aren't changes in the law. It's changes in how cases are perceived. There are far fewer trials today than there used to be. It's true for both criminal cases and civil cases. So, the most cases end up getting resolved through settlement or mediation, or in the case of criminal cases, pleading. So for young lawyers who are looking to get into the courtroom, there's far fewer opportunities than there were when I was a young lawyer.
So is that a good thing that things are kind of resolved before they go to court? I mean, they always talk about there's usually a big backlog in court, but is that a good thing that things are?
Well, it's good and bad. I think one of the concerns that people have in the area of criminal law is that people are pleading guilty, maybe to things they didn't really do, as a way of just managing the risk associated with going to trial and getting convicted, and then being sentenced to a really severe sentence. And one of the criticisms that you hear, particularly in the criminal defense bar, is that prosecutors overcharge as a way of putting pressure on criminal defendants to plead. There's some other reasons I think that people plead more, having to do with increased sentences under the sentencing guidelines, mandatory minimum sentences. But the judges, if every case that were in their court went to trial, their dockets would come to a screeching halt. Courts can't handle it. So in a certain way, everybody who's a participant in the criminal justice system has an interest in seeing to it the criminal defendants plead and the cases are processed, and that you can move on to the next one. That's what the criminal cases. With the civil cases, where you're usually fighting about money, the cost of trying cases is high, and that creates an incentive for parties to try to find a way to resolve things without having to incur the cost and the expense and the risk of uncertain outcome from going to trial.
Yeah, you were talking about all the charges, because you always hear about, some of these cases, they put all these charges on there, different things, and it sounds like each one of them, well, isn't that the same? First degree murder, and this and this and that. It's always funny. And like you said, are they lumping them on there as okay, we'll plead down to this lower one, since or you could get hit with this higher one.
Yeah, there's some concern that that's part of what's been going on.
Yeah, that's crazy. So so law is always a very interesting thing. I always find it fascinating and talk about. And I've had a couple other, the husband-wife lawyer team, Esley Manning and JB Manning. I don't know if you've ever met them. They've been at Killer Nashville, where you and I have met. And they talked about a lot of stuff, but I think there's a lot of fascination about law. Why do you think people are so interested in that? All these television shows and books, and and a lot of authors. Why do you think people think it's so? And obviously, it's more on television and the movies and stuff. It's a little more scaled down. You don't see all the boring stuff quite as much as what you're dealing with there.
Yeah, but I think there's a couple reasons why it's interesting to people. One is it's a front row seat to human nature. You see a lot about the human nature play out, both with regard to whatever the dispute is, the events that led up to the dispute, and then how people handle being involved in a dispute. Secondly, when you're involved in cases that involves conflict, you have two sides, and conflict can be interesting. And then third, there's drama, and there is drama in the courtroom. There are these moments in the courtroom And I don't know if, I've spent a fair amount of time in the courtroom, and I maybe I hear things, and I won't say it's like music, but you sense, you hear the emotional quality of certain things. The testimony of a witness, um, a statement that gets made and is hung in the air. So to me, there's a tremendous amount of drama uh, in the courtroom, and that can be really interesting and exciting too.
Yeah, so some of the authors like Scott Trudeau and John Grisham, Michael Connolly, they've written a lot of books. Obviously, the Lincoln Lawyer is very popular these days, and of course, there's a lot of their personal life shows up in there as well.
Yeah.
But can it be really dramatic like that in the courtroom? Like you see some of those where, the prosecutor and the defense lawyer, they're kind of going nose to nose, and they're trying to always one up each other and be in each other's heads. I mean, can it be that way? I mean, I'm sure obviously the plain Jane cases are not quite as bad, but really high profile cases, I'm sure. And I'm sure you've probably been on a few of those in your time.
Well, it may be that to the participants, it seems a lot more dramatic than it does to the people watching. And you're right. You made a comment earlier that there's a lot that goes on, including in the courtroom, that's kind of can be dull. And I've been involved in long trials where I think some of the jurors started nodding off at certain points. But I've also been involved in trials where I think there was a lot of drama. And to me, the drama, it isn't so much the lawyers getting up and objecting and arguing. That sort of comes off as just lawyerese. It's when you ask a witness a question, hopefully a clear and simple question that everybody understands what you're asking, and there's that, and everybody turns, because it's a little bit like a ping pong match or tennis. You're turning from the questioner to the answerer, and you're waiting to see what are the words that are going to come out of the witness's mouth. That to me at least, and it may be because I'm the one who's asking the questions, but to me, that's where the drama is. And then the art becomes, all right, you have your list of questions and you get an answer to a question on your list that is exactly right or even better than you hoped for. Do you have the sense to stop? In that sense, it's kind of like writing, which is a bigger part of, I think, of when you're editing yourself, is knowing what to take out, what to leave out. You can always put in more. There's a similar kind of judgment that needs to be made. When is it enough? And if you don't mind my adding, another similarity is when you're in the courtroom and you're trying to persuade a jury, how much do you have to connect the dots for them, or do you just give them enough information so that they can connect the dots themselves and feel a sense of, I think the term that's used these days is ownership of having reached the conclusion. And I suspect when you're writing, you sometimes confront the exact same thing. How much detail do you have to give? To what extent can you just rely on the reader to put things together?
So there's a lot of being a lawyer when you're in a case like that, reading the jury. You have the show like Bull where they have all these jury consultants and, they're doing all this technical stuff. But I mean, is a lot of it reading? Are you catching the jury's head with your questions, or are they going, oh, boring? Like you said, sometimes you need to know when you need to step back, and maybe you're getting too much detail.
Well, you're not going to get. Sometimes you'll have people fall asleep. Sometimes you'll have people nod their head or show some emotion. But most of the time, you're not getting that kind of feedback from a jury. So you're having to trust your own judgment about how you think a reasonable person is going to react to something. Again, not unlike writing, where you're writing, you don't have someone sitting over your shoulder reacting to every sentence that you write, and you're having to have your own sense of what you think works and doesn't work, and you have to trust that sense.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I did my last book that I released dealt with trial here in Colorado, and I talked to a judge who was my lawyer at one time after an accident I had, and he gave me a lot of insight. And I actually put the trial in the courtroom where he worked and stuff. And he told me that they do a lot of you can watch all the trials out in Adams County live on the internet now. They put all that, and I don't know if that's true of most courtrooms these days or not. They record everything, and most of it's live. And I got to watch. I sat there and I watched a lot of it, and it was interesting because it's so much different than what you see on TV. Like the lawyers, they're standing at the podium asking the questions. They aren't allowed to walk right up there to the jury stand, at least in Colorado. Maybe it's different in other states, and get like face to face with the person they're talking to, and grill them, and stuff like that. They have to sit at the podium and ask the questions through the microphone and everything else. And it seemed much less dramatic than it is, same thing, wandering around and talking to the jury right there in their faces and stuff. They weren't allowed to do that out here, at least for the proceedings that I was watching. So it was really interesting. Are most courtrooms these days, or most everything, is it all recorded now these days? And can you watch them live in most states like it is here in Colorado?
I don't know about most states. I can say in Ohio, you're not able to watch live what's going on in courtrooms. And as to whether, everything that's going on in the courtroom is usually being taken down in some way, either by a court reporter or recorded and then, later typed. It depends really how sophisticated technology is at the courtroom at that time. And generally these courtrooms I've been in have delayed technology, I'll put it, as compared to what you'd find elsewhere in the world. And as to ability to approach the witness and whether you have to stay at the podium, every, different jurisdictions are different and different judges are different. There are judges who will let you go right up to the jury box if that's what you want to do, leave the podium. Other judges that you have to ask permission to do it.
Right. Yeah. So it's all different in every state. So you obviously, if you're doing a court case in a different state, so do you have to have be legally allowed to practice law in other states, or how does that work for a lawyer if you're going out of state and doing anything?
Well, most courts will let you appear even if you're not a lawyer in that state by filing a motion. It's called pro hoc vice, where they use Latin terms for things when they can. So it lets you, the court gives you permission essentially to appear in the court, even though you're not licensed to practice in that state. A lot of times if you're in a jurisdiction or in a courtroom that's foreign to you, you're well advised to try to get a local lawyer to assist you, because they'll know what the rules of the road are in a way that it can be hard to tell just from reading, the rules of the courtroom. You have to have a little sense of what the judge's ideas about what's acceptable and not acceptable are before you open your mouth.
and start off on a bad note with the judge, which I'm sure you never want to do, right?
Right.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about your desire to be a writer. So we ran into each other at Killer Nashville last year. Is that the first year you've been to Killer Nashville, or have you gone?
It was actually I think my third.
Okay.
And I bet we met briefly.
We may have met before that.
Before that too. Um, and I enjoyed talking to you both times.
Yeah. So you went to Killer Nashville, obviously, to learn. Killer Nashville is a great learning type of environment. Clay runs a really great show. It's less for the fans. It's more a learning conference. There are some fans that come to it as well. So when you first went that first year, what did you feel like you got out of it?
Well, let me start off by
Sure.
got to disclose how my ignorance. So I had written a novel and wasn't sure what to do with it. It was I thought of it as a kind of a legal crime thriller, and I went online and looked at who has contests for these sorts of things, and saw Killer Nashville, which in my ignorance I'd never heard of before, and I submitted it and didn't think anything of it again until a couple months later I got contacted by Killer Nashville and said that I was a finalist. What I'd submitted was maybe I was a finalist. It was a finalist for thrillers. And
Was that the Claymore Award?
yes.
So the first 50 page, if anyone who knows, Claymore Award is the first 50 pages of an unpublished manuscript is
right.
what you're putting in for.
So I thought, well, that's great. I better go because if I don't go, maybe I don't win or something. So I went, and I'd been really, for me, it was a mind-blowing experience because I'd been doing this writing pretty much on my own. Wasn't part of a writers group. I wasn't part of a community of writers, and I was trying to figure out how to do things on my own. And then I go to this writers conference, and there's all these people who are trying to do similar things. So you're not all alone. And then there are these people, in these conferences, in these programs, talking about how they do things. And then people have their books and they're selling them, and you can buy their books and read how they do it and compare to what they've talked about how they do things to how it's written, and ask questions and get answers. So I came away. I didn't win the Claymore Award, but I came away with my like a brave new world. I discovered a new world, and I was very excited about it and about the people I'd met, and then have gone back 2 more times since then.
Yeah, so that's great that you got nominated and stuff. So did anything come from a lot of times even those who get nominated will sometimes have somebody contact them about possibly trying to get published. You obviously haven't gotten that yet, because I think you're still trying to get published, correct? With the and was it the same book that you had mentioned to me, the Devil Comes to Kindland?
Yeah, no, it isn't. It was a prior book called Collinwood, and what happened is I met an editor at Killer Nashville, and he read it, and he had some really good suggestions for some changes to make in the ending part, not the last quarter or so, 30% of the book, but in part because of all the ideas that were running through my head during Killer Nashville. I had an idea for a new book, and instead of going back and doing more work on Collinwood, I decided let's put that to one side and write this new one, The Devil Comes to Kindland. So I haven't touched Collinwood since that first Killer Nashville.
Mhm.
Instead, I've been focusing on this other book, although it involves a few of the same characters, and I think it's done now. It's done, and I'm The Devil Comes to Kindland is done, and I'm writing to agents and doing the other things you do to try to get published.
Yeah, it's a long, long, long process. Anyone who's ever gone through it before, it can. Some people are lucky, get right away, and some it just takes a lot of work and all that. So what was it? How long have you been writing? I mean, you obviously you write legal briefs all day long, probably, and stuff like that. But what about for the fun factor? How long have you been trying to do this?
Well, I started doing it in college. I went to and where it was in writing classes, and was frankly I I didn't have confidence in my ability to make a living as a writer, and which contributed to the decision to go to law school. And I've really been had a very consuming law practice for a long time, and I would write, not regularly when I'd have a vacation or a break or whatever. It was pretty inconsistent about writing, but in the last 5 years, I've, I've gotten more time, and that allowed me to first write Colin Wood, and then uh, The Devil Comes to Kindland. So I guess in some ways, I started writing many years ago. In another way, I really haven't been a consistent writer for a number of years, and have returned to it.
Well, obviously, being a lawyer, it takes a lot of time, a lot of your time, a lot of your energy and brain power and everything else. I would think it would be difficult to to bring in a fictional world with the real world and write and all that. Just to find the time alone, I'm sure was a challenge, even if you wanted to.
And it can be consuming. It's the kind of activity, I mean, when you're preparing for trial or in trial, the rest of the world doesn't exist even. You're just focused on what you're working on. Um, but if perhaps I'm sure there are people who've practiced law and have been able to get up at 5 a.m. and write for 2-3 hours before they go off to work, but I wasn't able to do that.
Yeah, it's pretty challenging. So obviously you wrote in college. Were there authors that you read that it kind of inspired you that said, I think I want to try to get into this crazy world maybe someday down the line? Who influenced you?
Well, I read what I'll call great literature in college, and uh, it had such an impact on me that I felt I want to do this too. And there was a writing teacher at my school named John Hersey. He's dead now. He won the Pulitzer Prize for his for Hiroshima, book he wrote about that was serialized actually in the New Yorker magazine, about the people who survived, or who lived through and survived the bombing of Hiroshima. And he was a wonderful man and a wonderful writer, and he had everybody wanted to be in his class, and it was very competitive to get in. And I submitted something and got in as a junior, and that was a big honor. And so I felt encouraged. That gave me the encouragement to think that I have some ability here, and I should pursue this. But I was, for better or worse, I didn't have the confidence to try to make a living doing it. Although his advice was, he used to talk about, a lot of his writing wasn't fiction, it was nonfiction. So, for example, Hiroshima, for which he won the Pulitzer Prize, was a nonfiction account of the people who survived Hiroshima, and he kind of was encouraging the writing more nonfiction too.
Well, and I would say you probably made the right choice. Very few people are able to make a good living, and especially when you were back in college. Of course, it was way before the days of independent and self-publishing and everything else. So you probably made the correct choice. And for me, I wrote in high school and all that, and then I eventually got married, had a kid, and all that stuff got put on the back burner. That was more important for me at the time. And then as my daughter got older and stuff, I started to revisit it. And then I started doing it. For me, it was kind of for my sanity in a lot of ways too. That was kind of my therapy to start writing, to deal with the rest of the world. But yeah, sometimes there are more important things, but I think you probably made the correct choice, at least. 40 years of successful law practice. I'm sure you've made a good living, probably a lot better than you probably would have as an author.
Although, I don't mean to digress, but I'm a musician too, and I play music in bands, and I play with some really fine musicians for whom music is really the most important thing in their lives.
Sure.
And they haven't tried to make a living as musicians, but they've had jobs that aren't as consuming, that give them the time and energy left over to be able to really pursue their music. So there's ways of making a living that still give you the ability to have the time and the energy to pursue things you want to do. I'm not sure law is one of them.
Yeah, I doubt it. And you're probably no such thing as being a part-time lawyer either, right? So
it's hard, and at least particularly the route that I took, and I have my own law firm, and I'd like to say a challenging practice involving litigation. I think it's probably more consuming than if I were, say, a lawyer doing trust and estate work,
right,
writing wills. That's me guessing.
So if you're in a band, what instruments did you play?
Well, I play keyboards.
Yeah.
And I've done that my whole life, and played in blues bands and rockabilly bands and rock bands and backing up pop singers, all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
Well, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame there in Cleveland. So yeah,
that's right.
Plenty of
and a lot of good musicians too, I have to say, because I've been in a couple different places now and met musicians from and seen musicians in different cities, and Cleveland has some very good musicians.
Well, I'm going to Nashville.
Yeah.
Music City. My next book, well, not the book that's coming out in May, but the next one I'm actually writing on is going to be mostly take place in Nashville. And I'm going to have a fictional country music husband-wife team that are hiring my private eye for assistance. But I always find when we fly in there, and it seems like half the people on the planes are carrying a guitar.
Yes.
And they take that guitar in and they put that up in the upper bin in the plane. It's like they take up the whole space. There's no room for anybody's luggage. I could throw my luggage on top of your guitar, but you probably wouldn't be very happy with me.
And then you get to the airport and there's somebody greeting you playing the guitar and singing.
That's right.
It's a very fun city. And then where we go for Killer Nashville down in Franklin,
Mm-hmm.
The last couple of years my wife has come with me because Franklin is so much fun, and then in the evenings you can go and hear really good music there too.
Yeah, Franklin's got antiquing shops and all that stuff. Yeah, my wife, she's come with me a couple of years. My daughter came 1 year too, but my wife usually comes with me as well. And she's like, "I'm gone. Have fun." And she's off doing her things and stuff like that. So, all right. So tell me a little bit about this book that you're trying to get published. The Devil Comes to Kindland. What's it about? What's the premise? Uh, is it a thriller, mystery, crime? What genre does it fit into?
Well, I'll tell you what it's about, and you can help me decide what genre. Maybe it's a criminal defense lawyer's autistic son is accused of rape, and the father is forced to defend him in court while fearing that his um, desperate wife and estranged brother are plotting to kill the accuser.
Oh wow. So well, it's obviously crime, mystery,
Yeah.
but maybe a little bit of a thriller. I don't know, or suspense, maybe.
Yeah, so it probably most readily is described as a legal thriller because there's thrill and there's courtroom, uh, activity going on, and it involves lawyers, but and it also involves crime, accusations of crime. Uh, but I tried to also get into what I'll call the family dynamics,
Right.
and have because the effect that having a child accused of committing a crime has upon a family, and because I always find there's a lot of thrillers where you have people who are not connected. They go through, they show up and things happen, but they're not connected uh, in a family way to other people. But I find the family dynamic adds a lot to the story. So here in this one, the wife, who's a wonderful person and devoted to trying to make the world a better place and being kind, you see the impact it has on her to have this son who is vulnerable because of being autistic, being accused of a crime, and eventually she changes to the point where she wants to kill the accuser. Um, and we were talking earlier about law being a front row seat to human nature. And yeah, you see the impact that stress and fear can have upon people. And probably not unlike going to war, you can't always predict how a person's going to react to the situation.
Well, yeah, the family dynamic, obviously, if it's your child, you want to think the best of them, right? You can't believe that they would do anything like that, and that's always that difficulty. And maybe even if the evidence is weighed heavily that says that he did do it, you want to lean the other way. So yes, that makes that can be very dramatic, I'm sure, and probably create drama within the family too, where
Absolutely.
different feelings about it.
And here, the father, who's a criminal defense lawyer, who eventually decides he has to defend the son, although he wasn't going to, and he was advised not to,
Right.
And ultimately this concludes that he has to do it, is watching with shock and horror as his wife, I'll say, deteriorates, but it's really changes, and then is having to prepare for trial, worrying that his wife and his estranged brother, and that's a whole another part of it, are going to kill her, the accuser. Um, So he, the criminal defense lawyer father is the protagonist, although we do get the point of view of some of the other characters a little bit too.
So it's written in third person then?
Yes.
Yes. And how long have you been working on this?
Well, since I met you at the first Killer Nashville, so
about 3 years.
That'd be So it's probably been let's see, 2003, 2.5 years. Yeah.
And you feel like it's finished, that you've written, and it's, or do you think there's going to be some more tweaking you might have to do, depending on if you find an agent and all that?
Randy, I think it's done. I'd like you can give me I'd be curious to see how you handle this or think about this. But what I did, first, I have some friends read and give me comments, although that's always tricky because you can get wildly disparate comments from people. And so you can't overreact to the comments you get. Yeah, but at this time I hired an editor. I figured let's find somebody who's a professional to help and read and give me comments. And I got really good comments, and revised accordingly. And then most recently, when we were at Killer Nashville in August, I was talking to a friend that I'd made there and asked him, excuse me one second. Asked him to give it a kind of what I thought would be final read. And he had some a really great idea for how to improve upon the kind of climactic scene. And I revised based upon his comments. And he, when you find somebody who you feel like gets it, who understands your writing and has a similar outlook, then you take their comments much more seriously, and you want to see what their reaction is. So to make a long story short, I've both had an editor read and give comments and revise based on those, and then also a writer friend. And I think we're done.
So have you had any positive feedback from any agents or anybody that seems like they might be interested?
Well, in truth, I only just completed the edits a few weeks ago. And I came down here to Florida for a breather, and now I'm ready to start writing to agents and some publishers that I met at Killer Nashville. Yeah. So I know it's a competitive world, and wish me luck. And I suppose I'll submit it to Killer Nashville for the Claymore this year. And if nobody's interested in publishing it, then probably I'll look to self-publish it and need to learn about how you do that and how you try to market your work that way.
Yeah, I'm all self-published, so it's it can be a lot of work too, or you pay people to help you do it. I've had self-published authors, I've had traditionally published authors, I've had some. Reed Farrell Coleman, who's a very successful, well-known author, and did the Jesse Stone series after Robert B. Parker passed away, and he has written a lot of other great books. And he goes, Randy, I don't have the time. He says, if I my job is to write the books, I pay everybody else to do everything else. And well, you make enough money to do that. Some of us might not be able to do that. Maybe being a lawyer, you might have the money to do that, but it does get expensive sometimes when you're in the self-publishing world.
Yeah.
So then what else? Do you have anything else that you've been working on book-wise?
I want to go back to Collinwood. the one that got me started with Killer Nashville and really got me, what I'll call writing at this stage. And that is about two guys who childhood friends who get into some criminal trouble themselves and then go off in separate directions in life. And later, one of them is a criminal prosecutor who discovers that one of the people he's prosecuting, one of the defendants in the case, is his old buddy. Originally, actually, and I'd like your reaction to this. It started out about the one guy's white and the other guy's black, and the white guy becomes a prosecutor, and the black guy is one of the defendants. And people are all really sensitive about, have been really sensitive about race, and what is it what are you doing, trying to say, etc., about race, but it really, the intention wasn't for it to be a commentary about race in any way. And I think, particularly in the publishing industry, you read these stories about people being excoriated for presuming to be able to write from the perspective of a race that's different than their own, or gender different than their own. But I've concluded that I'm going to ignore all of that and write the story that I want to write, which is about my sense is 75% written, and I want to rewrite the ending and how things evolved with the two of them at the ending, per the comments that I got from this very good editor that I met at Killer Nashville. So that's the next writing task on my list. And it's funny, editing. Well, you know better than I do. Writing is all just making decisions, one decision after another, and you've made these decisions, and then you have to be able to look at the decisions you've made and conclude that you were wrong, and make new decisions. And as to how and when that you finally have made the right decisions, and to what extent you rely on other people, and who do you rely on, and all of that, there doesn't seem to be any single answer to it.
Well, I, for one, dislike editing. When I pay an editor to edit all my books and stuff, but it's not a very fun process. And, I get, like, my last book, I just got back from her, and she was like, "Don't freak out about all the red you see." It's like, oh, great. Yeah. So yeah, it's one of those things I don't really enjoy that much. Robert Brew Parker, who is one of the great authors of all time when it comes to mystery and crime and all that. I remember hearing an interview once from him. He says, I just sit down and write. I write it out. I don't go back and reread it. I don't go back and re-edit or anything. I just send it off to them, let them take care of it. So, well, if you're as good as he is, you can get away with that. The rest of us, we're not quite so lucky as all that.
Yeah.
And as you're talking about race, I think the only thing I have to say about that is the only perspective that is our true perspective is about ourselves. We're always writing about somebody else, whether it's a different race, a different, male, female, children, anything else. The only way that you're really going to write from a true perspective that you completely understand is going to be from your own. So but my Divine Devil series, I had a black protagonist in there, and I've never had any grief about writing about that. And I have a wide, diverse amount of characters in this series as well. And I just think you have to write and understand it. Obviously, a black man dealing in the world has to deal with things differently than, say, me, who's a middle class white person, the things that you run across and stuff. So those things you just have to make sure that you write in your story, so you've got that empathy and stuff. But I think the only perspective we really understand is our own, and everything else we write is going to be somebody else, and you're creating those characters.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never had a problem with that. A lot of the male authors who've written books where like Robert B. Parker again, Sonny Randall was first person, and he was writing from a woman's point of view and stuff. I don't think I ever heard anybody criticize him for that. Of course, again, he was a big time author, but I think every perspective we write is going to be something different than our own. So.
Mm-hmm.
So what, so you talked about possibly trying to self-publish if you can't find. So at what point do you think you're going to say, okay, I've sent this out enough times to people. How much are you going to give it before you say it? And I hope you find somebody. It sounds very interesting. It should be an interesting story. It's just finding the right person that thinks, everybody, all these agents and everything, of course, they're saying, well, it won't sell.
Yeah.
They and you've heard plenty of the authors have gone up there who sat there and said, they told me it wouldn't sell, and I finally found somebody, and of course they're big time authors now. So.
Yeah, I can't answer that question. At what point might I say enough already? It's time to just self-publish. We'll see. I'm by nature kind of an optimist who thinks you never know when something good can happen. And with this kind of activity, there's nothing bad that can happen. It's just that the good thing may not happen.
Well, the Claymore Award would be a good one to turn it in for. I've put in a couple books for the Claymore, and I haven't even been a finalist. The Divine Devils, which I was just showing you there, I put that in for a Claymore. I got some feedback on it. Wasn't a finalist, and I put the book out. And the next year, I won the Best Thriller Award. So you just never know. So
right.
Yeah. So, but I think the feedback was helpful to hear. So, and that's always good to find, trusted sources. And that's always the challenge too, because everybody has a different opinion. So it's a matter of which opinions do you say, okay, yeah, I think that's a good idea. It still has to play for what you feel comfortable with as well.
Right. And what's interesting too is when you get opinions from other writers, you need to go read what they write. And then because generally their ideas about what is appropriate or what works or whatever is reflected in how they write. And you may see, all right, I understand now why they were suggesting I do this, because this is how they view the world.
Right.
And it may not be how you see the world.
No, we all see things different. We all see things differently and all that. So,
yeah.
So, obviously your two books sounds like you've kind of fallen back on your career as a lawyer and wrote those into the stories. Is there a book out there in your mind that you still want to write that you haven't written yet?
Yeah. So, what comes to me is a person being in a situation, which may not be the best way to come up with a story, because it's not a plot, but it's a situation that a person is in. So with The Devil Comes to Kindland, you have a criminal defense lawyer whose son is accused of rape. That's the situation that he's in. With Collinwood, it's a prosecutor who finds that he's prosecuting a guy who he committed crimes with when they were young. I have this idea, and I haven't figured out what the plot will be exactly. It's very different, but it's a guy who has a kind of guardian angel, and I haven't decided yet whether it's a real person or if it's a god-like figure. who is looking after him, but is overprotective, by which I mean when somebody does something to harm or cross the protagonist, they're killed. And gradually the protagonist begins to realize what's happening, and there's this person or force that out of love and good intentions is trying to protect him, but is doing terrible things and harming people much more than is appropriate. And then I had this idea that eventually we realize that it's not an external force at all. It's him. And that's the idea I have for the next. And it's very
split personality, or something. He's doing it and he doesn't realize he's doing it. Think something like that, maybe.
I'm not sure. It's at that embryonic stage, and I promised myself I'm going to finish the revisions to Collinwood before I start anything new. But it's an idea that keeps with me. You probably have ideas that just keep with you, and at some point you got to do something with them.
Oh yeah, they're in my head and I got to get them out. So I'm mostly retired these days, so I have a little more time than you do. So I'm writing most every day, which that's a question I usually ask. Do you try to sit down and write every day, or obviously working as you do, it may be a little more difficult to do that?
So when I've had periods of peace and quiet, I am a pretty disciplined person, and I write every day in the morning, starting at the same time. So given the chance, I think I could be a pretty a disciplined, consistent writer. And I've had periods where I've done that, so when you are doing your edits to a book that you thought was done, you really have to be. I find it's not something you can pick up and then put down and pick up and put down. You have to be very focused and on the product as a whole. So the short answer is I've had periods of time when I've been able to write every day and be a disciplined writer, but other times, often the law practice, for example, interferes with that.
So is retirement in the offing to somewhere down the road where you're going to have a little more time on your hands to do a little bit more?
Undoubtedly, at some point. And
live in Florida where it's warmer all the time?
At least in the winter. But, unlike, some people, and you may know some people like this who, they worry about how are they going to stay busy when they retire. One of the nice things about writing like we do is, and having ideas about things you want to write, is that's not a fear. You know that you'll be able to keep yourself very busy.
Yeah, I'm not bored at all. My neighbor across the street, he's not an author, but he retired, and I talk to him rather frequently, and he goes, I'm busier now than I was before I retired. He says, I thought I'd have all this spare time on my hands, and but there's things that maybe that always got put on the back burner when you were working all the time. My wife still works. She works in the office next to mine here at our house because she can work from home. So I do a lot of the house stuff, and I a lot of times make dinner a lot of times and make sure the dogs are cleaning up the yard, and I do a lot of yard work and stuff. And then it's the writing. So yeah, I never have felt bored at all when
No.
retired, and I'm not completely retired, but I'm mostly retired. So
that's one of the nice things about being a writer is you're never bored. You're maybe other things, but you're not bored.
That's right. All kinds of stories. So what about any nonfiction stuff? You're talking about your mentor there. Have you ever thought about writing anything about I know you have to be careful and like, because of privacy and all these other things, but putting out anything talking about your life as a lawyer?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I was talking to some friends a few weeks ago, and I was telling them about uh, some of the cases that I've handled. And that's what he said too. He said people would find this fascinating. And I don't know, because I am very conscious of what's called the attorney-client privilege and the need to maintain confidentiality. I sometimes see books that lawyers have written about their cases, and I'm a little taken aback, because you're quoting your client, you're describing what he's told you. You're not supposed to do that. I guess maybe they've gotten permission to do it, but I don't know that I wouldn't. I don't know that I would be able to get permission from my clients. I don't know that I would even want to ask them. There's a lot of kind of trust and confidence that occurs, and sometimes the most interesting things are to describe how your client is reacting to the situation that they're in, and I'm not sure that they would want that to be publicized either.
Yeah.
What I like better. We'll see if it works. Is drawing on the cases I've worked on, and using that in fiction, because I'm not copying any particular person, or describing anything that actually happened, but at the same time, I'm able to draw on all of those experiences in order to make I guess, a more realistic depiction of the characters and the situation. And certainly the courtroom stuff. There, I have a real good sense of what actually does happen. And although a lot of it can be boring, it can be exciting too.
So I always ask this question of everyone, and you've written yourself a couple books yourself, and you've read a lot and stuff. But the name of the show is Bringing Life to Characters. So, what is it that you look for? And you talked a little bit about this, about your family dynamic, but what is it you look for when you're creating those characters that you think gets them to jump off the page at people, that will get them to read?
Well, I'm not sure I'm the best at drawing characters. I've read people who draw characters real well, but what I end up doing is bringing out the character through dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And from the things that they say, I think is the major way I try to communicate what they're like.
And dialogue can be tough too sometimes. Some people say it sounds stilted the way they're talking back and forth, and I've had a few people say that about some of my dialogue sometimes. But dialogue can be, to try to make it sound natural and all that, can be challenging, and that does.
Maybe one of the benefits of spending time in examining witnesses and in trial is you're having to listen really carefully to what people say and how they say it, and there'll be a word that gets used that seems a little out of place, or you'll ask a question and the answer is a diversion. They're not answering your question. I think all of that helps develop your ear for dialogue.
Yeah.
Because you're hearing how people talk.
Do you listen when you're reading your dialogue? Do you read it back out loud to yourself so you can hear it, or
I hear it just from reading it?
You just hear it. You can just do that.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I don't know how much of that is as a result of the hours and hours to listening to witnesses testify, but maybe.
Well, it doesn't sound like you ever nodded off in any of your cases. Have you ever been called for jury duty?
Yeah, so I have been, and it's funny you should say that, because a week from Monday, my wife and I are both reporting for jury duty,
Oh, wow.
but I always get kicked off.
Yes, I was gonna say, because as soon as you say that you're a lawyer, they probably go, yeah.
And it's too bad, because I'd like to serve on a jury, because think about your ability to then write about what goes on in a jury room would be improved. Now, I've participated in what are called mock trials, where you have a fake jury hear evidence that you put forth, and then you listen to them deliberate. So I've heard a little bit, like that, but it's not the same as hearing how jurors talk in a real court. And so I would love to be on a jury.
Well, maybe you have to be like one of the later ones where they don't have any more challenges left, and they're pretty much stuck with you, right? So then you have to be on the jury. That
Yeah,
might be a good story, even in a book, where the lawyer thinks he's going to get kicked off and he doesn't. And he ends up on the jury and the trial, and maybe there's even something there that even deeper.
that's a good idea.
Well, I'll let you write it out for me, since you got more experience with the lawyer stuff than I do.
All right.
So, since you don't have anything published, you don't have a website or anything yet for any of your books, I'm assuming.
The only website I have is for my law firm.
Yeah, and I brought that up, so there he is. At least that's his name on there. But so it looks like you have 4 lawyers in your firm, from what I saw on the website.
Yeah, 3 excellent lawyers and me.
Well, whose name's first?
Well, that's just because I'm older.
Well, that's okay. You probably started it, right? So
Yeah.
they haven't tried to run you off yet. So that's
Not yet, but my time's coming, I'm sure.
yeah. Well, one day when you're ready to sit there and write full time, that'll be great. And all that. Are you planning on going to Killer Nashville again this year?
Yeah, I am. It's great fun. It
And did you go to
is.
BoucherCon last year? It was a week after Killer Nashville
No, I
in
didn't.
Nashville.
And in fact, that's Killer Nashville is the only writers conference I've been to. So, and I remember you and I talked about it a little bit, Boucher being down there and all, but I had to get back to work.
Yeah. couldn't be away for too long. Yeah.
Right.
Well, BoucherCon's a little bit different. It's a little more of a fan-based conference, but a lot of really big name authors there, and that's where I got to meet Reed Farrell Coleman and Lee Child's brother, who's taken over the series for the Reacher series. I got to meet him, Andrew Child as well, and a few authors that I knew and a few I didn't, and a lot I got to meet that are going to be on the conference. So, okay. Well, was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I have lots of questions for you, but I'll save them for when I see you.
I don't know if I'm going to make it this year. We'll have to see. My wife is going to be working. She's on a big project for her work, and she's going to be gone for like 2 weeks right around that time. I wanted to go to BoucherCon is in New Orleans, like a week. It's a week or 2 after Killer Nashville. And I really wanted to go to that because Michael Conley is going to be there, and I'm a big Michael Conley fan. And but I don't think I'm going to go. We'll see. But we'll see about Killer Nashville. I'll have a book in for one of the awards, so we'll see if Clay contacts me. I may at least come down at least for the award ceremony if I happen to get one in there. I haven't last couple of years. I haven't been. I was one of the best books of the year last year, but I didn't make it as a finalist in the categories. My category is really tough. Thrillers and private eyes. There's so many books to compete against, so that's always a
I have one of them right here.
Oh, well, thank you. Murder by 100 Cuts. That's my that's the newest one in the Jarvis series, which a little bit of criminal law in there. So
Yeah.
you
Great.
get a chance to read it, you'll have to tell me what you think. I tried to make it somewhat realistic, but it's got to be a little bit dramatic, right? So
Of course.
the bad guy is causing a lot of problems in the courtroom and stuff. So, but he's doing it on purpose. He has a plan. So I won't give any other spoilers than that. So, well, great. Well, Phil, thank you. I appreciate you being on tonight. Good luck with your search for an agent. I wish I could help you there, but no luck for me. Don't know any agents that are looking, but be persistent and get those letters written. And it sounds like an interesting story. So I'm sure you'll be able to find somebody that'll publish it, hopefully.
Well, thanks, and appreciate your having me on your show. It's been fun.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being on. I always love talking about the law and everything else and getting different perspectives from authors. But take care. Stay, I'll say stay warm. It's actually been cold down in Florida there. They actually had some snow in some of the areas down there. So,
It's better than Ohio. I believe me.
A lot better than it was there. So, yeah. Okay. Well, thanks again. Take care. And I'll let you know if I make it to Nashville. We'll have a chance to sit down and talk. All right.
Look forward to it. All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I have another show next Monday, and I'm going to have a sister writing team, which I met also at Killer Nashville, Blythe Hudson and Carter Fielding. And they're both overseas, so we'll see how that goes when it comes to the technology. We may have some challenges there, but hopefully it goes well. And that won't be till 8 p.m. my time, since they're over in one is in I should have wrote down where they're at. I forgot, but they're both in two different time zones, far apart. So we had to spread that out pretty far. So it'll be morning time for them. So, but thanks everyone for listening tonight, and we will talk to you in a little less than a week.